Alright, we're ready to put this drive back on. Now, inside of the bell housing here is this big black rubber gasket, okay? That goes in all the way up against the shoulder on the aluminum, in the aluminum housing. You'll see where that was when you took it off. You'll need to put this new one on when you put it back together. So I've already taken rubbing alcohol and cleaned off that whole metal aluminum area really good. You want to clean it off really good, and then use bellows adhesive, or you could get it locally at auto parts store. They call it weather strip adhesive. Weather strip adhesive is the same as bellows adhesive. This is what you'll use to glue this rubber seal in place. And also your water passage O-ring, which is in here too. Now, quick tip, this O-ring is the same size as your gas cap O-ring, which is in another video. Watch that because it's very important. Quick tip. So we're going to dig in here, and first we're going to grab this black gasket. We're going to put a little adhesive on it and stick it in place. Now, we don't need to go crazy, but just a nice thin even coat on the surface that hits the shoulder. And by shoulder I mean the little ledge inside there, and then maybe a little bit on the outside too, because that's obviously where it touches. But just glue it in place. Now, you want to glue this in place because it's very important. That's actually what keeps water out of this cavity. This big gasket that goes along the outside, it does not. Water will get in through there and get into your U-joint bellows cavity where it needs to be bone dry. So that little seal is in place. We're going to let it dry a minute. This bellows adhesive does dry rather quickly. I usually like to let it dry for about 5 minutes though. We're not going to do that right now. We're just going to be careful. You want to be very careful though, when you're putting this back on, you don't dislodge that seal that you just glued in place. That's why we're gluing it in place, because you can very easily dislodge it, because once you get going, you can't see anymore. So, alright. Our rubber O-ring here was good. It's fine. It looks nice. It's not squished. It's not pinched. We're going to leave it. Now, this gasket, you can see it's got some orange rubber sealant on the one hole where your gear lube monitor would be on a Gen 2. This is not a Gen 2. This is a Gen 1. So we don't have a gear lube passage there. But out of habit, I always put that on the right side. It goes on the right starboard side of this bell housing. Alright, so that's that. Now, our O-rings are good on the shaft, but there are new O-rings there if you wanted to put them on there. We greased our U-joints, we cleaned our splines, and we put new grease on our splines. Everything else looks good in there. We greased our gimbal bearing, we cleaned up any excess grease. We're going to make sure we're still in forward gear, and this female portion here is nice and straight. We're going to confirm that we're in forward gear in the drive by grabbing the propeller and turning it counterclockwise, or not turning it, but just putting a little pressure on it, and you can see our input shaft is moving, and the shift shaft is straight. Shoe is straight. So we're ready to go on. Now, you may need some help if you're doing this by yourself without a cart, just to help hold things. And Gen 1s, you got to make sure these hydraulic rams are on top of the drive, because you won't be able to get them up after and you'll be very mad. So we're going to put those up on top now. Gen 2, they will fit up, so it's not that big of a deal, but you want to make sure they're up. You got to lower this down a little bit. So everything's level. And it looks about right. You might have to go down a little more. So you want to be careful. You don't dislodge that seal that we glued in. And you don't want to knock this thing out of gear or anything. And we're just going to try to get this input shaft into the gimbal bearing. And we are. Pick up on the U-joints to help hold it up. We're going in. We're not going to hit that rubber O-ring in there. Get a flashlight. Make sure that everything is still good. Okay, we're getting closer. Might have to go down just a little. You want to make sure that this shift assembly goes into the out drive and it's a little cavity where it goes. There's some things you want to make sure aren't hitting down here. These little ears here, everything is lined up. One last chance to make sure we didn't knock off that rubber ring in there. Everything looks pretty good. Yeah, everything looks good. Okay, now we're to the point where the splines are going to need to line up. So you'll find that you can push and push and push and it's not going. I like to use the cart because that really helps push. It's not going, right? We're in forward gear, so if we move this prop counterclockwise, it's going to turn that input shaft so that the splines line up on the input shaft to the engine coupler. We're going to push and turn the prop counterclockwise at the same time and it should go in. Alright, I think we're in because it just locked up. It won't turn anymore. So you want to just kind of push and jerk and push and jerk and it will go in. Some go in like butter, most don't. Most you really got to push and bang and beat and bang. Sometimes I'll take like an 8x8 or a 6x6 block of wood and just kind of tap right there. I use my foot sometimes to push. You don't want to use too much force because if you need too much force, something is wrong. Engine alignment could be wrong. You could have your shift cable in there pinched. Something could be wrong if you need too much force. But a little bit, gentle. We're in all the way. We're good. Now's the time when you want to double check that it's still in forward. Yep, so counterclockwise, it's not moving. The engine, it's in the engine coupler, the engine is stopping it from turning. And we can look underneath and make sure that the shift shoe is in its little mechanism there. Yep, nice and straight. It's in there. It's not too low. Now when you split the two halves, there's a washer that holds that shift shoe up, that brass shift shoe. And if that fell out, that shoe will be down too far and won't even be in that little mechanism. So you want to make sure that looks good, everything looks good and makes sense to you right now, okay? We're in forward, we didn't dislodge it, everything's good. Now we can put our washers on, our nuts on, and I like to start with the center ones first and work our way up and down. And that's about it. You don't need to crank them on too awful bad, but I would say like 50, 60 foot-pounds of torque is good. They are nylock nuts. If the nylon portion of the nut is pretty ratty, maybe you want to get yourself some new nuts. And that's about it. It's on. So we're going to put the washers on, our nuts on, tighten them down, put our tilt pin back in with the skinny washers. It can only go one way, you'll know. With the skinny washers on the inside, and that's it. That's all there is to it. It's really simple, guys. Just take your time, minimize any distractions you have, and make sense of the procedure. It's really simple. I don't think you can screw it up too badly. All right. So any questions, leave them in the comments. But that's how you install an Alpha Gen 1.